first of all have to look at it from different standpoints. Okay, so there's one audience. The main audience member for buying MicroStrategy are people who cannot buy Bitcoin, right?
Yep.
And who there's a whole bunch of people who can't buy Bitcoin or buy the Bitcoin ETF. Okay, I'll give you a couple examples. Yeah. So first of all, if you are in the UK, right, and you have your money in a pension fund,
yep,
that pension fund cannot buy, by law, these ETFs. Okay.
In the United States, so they can't get to BlackRock, anything in the United States. All those ETFs.
No, they can't buy. They can buy the BlackRock Spider Fund.
Yeah.
Right. They can't buy they can't buy IBIT. Okay.
Now, why is that? Is it just because it's illegal in Britain?
Yeah. Like, look, I mean, the thing we keep on forgetting is that, these things were not, you couldn't buy them in America a year ago.
Yeah.
Right. So these things started trading on January 11th. They are not trading. They're not open to the rest of the world, yet. So first of all, there's a move, right? The shares don't move in price. Okay. And the Bitcoin doesn't, just exactly where it is right after that share issue. Right.
Yep.
It will now be 2.5 to 1. Right.
Okay, so they'll start closing the gap, even if
prices. So the gap kind of closes at even share price. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so the gap closes. So which is another way of putting it is there's a yield in Satoshi. It's sort of a Bitcoin yield. So if you look at the number of, there's 270 million MicroStrategy shares right now. They've issued more, right? So it was a smaller number.
Yep.
But there's 170,000 Satoshis per share right now of Bitcoin in each MicroStrategy share. Okay. That number is going up. Okay.
Okay.
So there, that was started the year at 125,000. Now it's up to 170,000. So it's kind of, it's growing into its valuation. You see what I'm saying? It just doesn't matter. Like it's not like everybody's going to go into Selmer Scientific, which is this little micro cap stock. They won't.
Yeah.
They're going to, and the also thing is people trust Michael Saylor, right?
Yeah, they do. They do.
And so look, if you're investing in a stock, you're also investing in the CEO.
Yeah.
Some no-name thing, some random thing, you're like, I don't trust it. I don't think they're going to make the right decisions. They're not going to raise the money at the right time and everything else. So I think there's a lot of trust in he's like,
not gold, not 2%. Dollars.
What?
I think this is the point you're making is not gold, not dollars, Bitcoin and sats. You think, that's your core.
That's his unit of value is sats.
Yeah.
Right. Now I think, everybody else in the S&P 500 is thinking dollars. They're thinking dollars per share, earnings per share in dollars, right? Price to earnings in dollars, right?
Yep.
Now, but if you look at price to earnings in Bitcoin, that's a very different metric, right? Because if you think about, let's just say you say, okay, great. How much is Microsoft earning in Bitcoin? Okay.
Yeah.
And then you go, okay, they're earning this amount per dollar per share, and that's growing at this amount per, But then you go, the amount that they're earning in Bitcoin is actually going down in Bitcoin.
Right.
They're getting less and less Bitcoin, right?
Yep.
And the Bitcoin that they have $100 million right now, $100 billion. And you've got, $2 trillion worth of Bitcoin. But they don't actually own, which would be about, let's say about 1%, right? But they don't own that Bitcoin.
Yeah.
The TradFi only owns the ETF and MicroStrategy. So they only own about 10% of that Bitcoin. So they really have 1/10 of 1% exposure.
Yes. So it's very tiny.
Huge world with 1/10 of 1% exposure to the asset that's about to replace it.
Wow. That's an incredible way to think about it.
And if you start thinking it that way, it's like, what's the chance we get to, instead of 1/10 of 1%, 1%?
Yeah, well, pretty good. So that's a
100%, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you get to 1%, that means you're going to have, let's just call it $2 trillion that come into this asset class.
Yeah.
Well, you get gold,
Yeah.
And here, it's not going to be Solana. It's not going to be Ethereum. Like the reference currency is going to be Bitcoin. Not to say that those things won't exist.
Yeah.
But the reference currency is going to be Bitcoin. That's going to be the reference. And, if you start accepting that standpoint that we are headed into a Bitcoin world, then, I think what Saylor's doing is actually really brilliant, because, he is likely to, he's likely to become one of the wealthiest individuals, if not the wealthiest. Look, Elon Musk was sort of a guy in trouble at one point, with Tesla.
Yeah.
Like this thing's going to go bust. I've got, 6 months of runway unless the government bails me out and blah, blah, blah. Right.
It was weeks. He had weeks.
Weeks. Yeah, now he's the world's richest man. Top, just sort of randomly. Right. Yeah.
So you didn't call the top. You're not saying you called the top.
No, I didn't call it at all. I just sort of said, I'm just going to sell it and buy Bitcoin with it. Because I had a really good profit in these calls. But now I was going to do it today, but I just got busy with other stuff. But I'm probably going to take a little bit of a flyer with MSTR with a little bit, just like as a trade. But I feel like I should own it. And I do think that there's some chance that it does better than Bitcoin here.
Really?
Yeah.
How in the world would that be possible? Okay. How does
that two multiplier, I think we could have an absolute, I think 2025 could be like 2017, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I think, right?
Yep. I agree.
It just seems like everything's kind of happening at once, like the Trump administration's coming in, the Bitcoin reserve, a seat at the table right now. Right now, up till now, Goldman is a bank, right? So after 2008, a lot of these brokerages became banks. So Morgan Stanley Merrill got bought by Bank of America, right? All these things got banking license, but which is good for them. They can do more. Like Goldman Sachs issues the Apple Card now, right?
Yeah,
it's a bank.
Yeah,
but the downside is they have reporting relationships. They have regulators now, banking regulators.
Yeah,
and those banking regulators, but we're not in the bubble.
Yeah, there was one other little interesting thing I wanted to bring up too. So in the past week and a half or so, there have been two major gold finds. One in China. Yeah. And I think that was something like 100 billion or so in new gold. And then there was one in El Salvador, which was reportedly 3 trillion.
Yeah.
That is like a lot of new gold.
You have to take that a little bit with a grain of salt because, a lot of this stuff, it might be, in theory, there's 3 trillion. But of course, if you want to get it out of the ground, it'll cost you 2 trillion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and you need a road that's going to take 10 years to build. And we're super lucky to have them. Let me put it this way. There's a lot of other people who used to be very loud in the Bitcoin world. And I'm not going to name any names.
I know who you're thinking of.
Yeah. Sort of the previous couple generations ago of Bitcoin, like that's all we had. I mean, we didn't have the sailors back then,
That's true.
And so, and like Andreas is not speaking anymore. He was fantastic at the beginning, in 2013, 2014. But.
Yeah, but also Andreas was a brainiac, right? So like the brainy speak does not play with the mob. And,
that's right.
Rome is the sand of the Colosseum, not the marble of the Senate floor. We need the sand of the Colosseum people, right? And that's Saylor. Saylor is good at that, right? So, yeah.
Exactly. So I think, but, I'm not a doomsdayer for